Hello, viewers. This is Qamar Cheema, and I am thrilled to have with me Mr. Adam Weinstein. He's a research fellow at the Queen's Institute for the Responsible Statecraft. Adam, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, how do you see these recent developments in Middle East, where the American National Security Advisor was in Saudi Arabia, along with the Emiratis and the Indian National Security Advisor? Do you find that the Americans are going to re-engage with the Middle East, particularly with Saudi Arabia, and they are getting an Indian support to be there? So, what do you make of that, Adam?
Well, I mean, in some sense, it's recent, but we have to remember that I2U2 has been in the works for a while now. So it's not that recent. Sometimes these things appear like they happen out of nowhere, but we have to remember there's a lot of work going on in the background. I do think the U.S. is concerned about the success of Chinese diplomacy and therefore wants to assert itself as well.
Adam, Adam, the point is that, and how do you see this Chinese growing role in Middle East, particularly if you just look at that, how the Chinese have helped Saudis and Iranians to come closer?
Well, look, Beijing was in an advantageous position to do that because they buy oil from Iran and Saudi Arabia. So when you're dealing with two of your customers, it's a little bit easier to act as a bridge between them. I think it was a net positive for the region, and in a more multipolar world, the United States is going to have to get used to that. But we also have to remember, look, this didn't happen out of nowhere. There was the Baghdad process. The U.S. was involved in this as well in the preceding years. So this, it wasn't just China came and brought the two sides together, but I think it was a success for Chinese diplomacy. And I don't know that Washington should feel threatened by that.
So, meanwhile, okay, you are right that the United States should be used to of such developments. So, do you think this all started when India and many other countries started buying oil from the Russia, and the America felt itself helpless? So, do you think that the temperature in the U.S. is to live with the world which is rising very fast and which is not a Western world?
Well, look, the United States still has deep diplomatic inroads in the region and Pakistan and the Middle East, even more so than China in many ways. So, perhaps it's not a Western world, it's a multipolar world. I think there's room for everyone. I know that sounds a little bit idealistic. I think Washington is going to have to adjust to that. I think it was a bit of a wake-up call in terms of how India behaved after the invasion of Ukraine. Perhaps some folks, especially India watchers in Washington, were a little bit naive about that. And I think it was a good lesson for them. Look, India will align with the United States when it makes sense for India, and it won't when it doesn't make sense. India has a long non-aligned history, and I think that policy is still well and alive in many ways. And, it's important for us not to get high on our own rhetoric, so to speak. We often release these not myself, but the U.S. government will release statements about its diplomatic engagement and its partnership being based on civilizational ties or democracy and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's mostly rooted in realpolitik and geostrategic interests and things like that. And from that perspective, yeah, it makes sense for India to partner with the United States so far as the Indo-Pacific strategy, but it doesn't make sense for India to simply follow the United States when it comes to Washington's stance on Russia.
So, Adam, how do you see this such kind of a rhetoric emerging from India and France, particularly about the strategic autonomy? So we are listening that the French president in China was of the view that Europe should be a pole of power. And since you're also talking about multilateral words, so do you think that the words and particularly the Western powers need to get ready for this mantra of strategic autonomy, which is emerging from the West and many other countries?
Well, look, this gets a little bit outside of my expertise, but what I'll say to that is I'll believe it when I see it. Europe likes to talk about strategic autonomy, and maybe they should go for it. I'll believe it when I see it. Sometimes their actions have not really reflected their rhetoric when it comes to that.
So Adam, how do you see this trilateral meeting that has happened in Islamabad, where the Chinese and the Afghan foreign ministers were here? Do you think that this trilateral meeting is going to bring Afghan Taliban into any fold, and they can behave more responsibly? What do you make out of this trilateral meeting, if you have seen that?
Well, again, I'll believe it when I see it. I think any diplomacy in Afghanistan is a good thing. I understand why China and Russia and Pakistan have to engage in that kind of diplomacy. It would be a net positive for the region if BRI could extend into Afghanistan. There's many barriers to that. One of the biggest barriers is the Taliban's approach to governance. We see how they treat the TTP. I don't think they've been very serious about that. They've made policy choices that are not only harmful for Afghans and Afghan women, but make working with them very difficult from an optics standpoint, and from also from a moral standpoint to some degree. I think Pakistan has applied the pressure it can apply, but it doesn't have that much leverage. So I'll believe it when I see it. Ultimately, the Taliban get to decide whether Afghanistan is treated like a normal country or not.
So, Adam, how do you see Pakistan-U.S. relations, particularly these recent leaks, which were reported in Washington Post, where Hiran Rabbani said that Pakistan's Minister for Foreign Affairs, that Pakistan, it will be difficult for Pakistan to keep a balance in coming times. What do you make of that?
I think sometimes Pakistan exaggerates its leverage in some areas and then under-exaggerates its leverage in other areas. I think Pakistan actually can keep a balance. I think Pakistan is important to both countries. Let's face it, there's incredible ties between the Pakistani political class and sort of business elites with the United States. I don't see them going to China other than for business reasons. They come on vacation in the United States. They send their kids to study in the United States. The United States is the biggest recipient of Fulbright students. Sometimes they even own property in the United States and, of course, the UK. So this idea that the future of Pakistan is exclusively in China, I don't believe that. I don't buy that. All countries have their internal debates and internal memos. This is one of them. It's from a government that may or may not be in power in a few months. So I don't think it really means anything for the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. I think the U.S.-Pakistan relationship needs to move towards a more normalized kind of position in which we move beyond the war on terror, and we are going to have areas where we align and areas where we disagree. But what I'd say to Pakistani policymakers is I don't think there's a reason to necessarily feel like you have to kowtow to Russia or to China or to anyone else. I think Pakistan has leverage. Pakistan can walk a middle line, and it is a bit like walking a tightrope. But the Pakistani leaders have always said, look, China doesn't ask us to pick sides. Well, if that's true, then don't pick sides. And I certainly think it's important that the United States doesn't ask Pakistan to choose sides either. And sometimes this framing of democracy versus non-democracy is not very helpful, especially when we're looking for cooperation in the global South. So I think the United States should probably move away from splitting the world into two camps, but China has to do that as well.
So, Adam, how do you see this Pakistan-U.S. relations in post-U.S. Withdrawal from Afghanistan? Do you think that this recent assessment in Washington D.C. to engage with Pakistan but downgrade the relations with Pakistan is a move that will be taken positively in Islamabad?
Sorry, don't do what with the relations in Pakistan?
So my question is that how do you see this American move to downgrade relations with Pakistan since the American withdrawal from Afghanistan? So, for instance,
yeah. Look, I think it's wrong to look at it as a downgrade. I think the relationship. Look, the example I always use is that Pakistan wasn't mentioned once in Biden's national security strategy. And I remember folks in Islamabad being concerned about that. And I said, look, it's a great thing. You don't want to be in the national security strategy. Many important countries they're friends of the United States are not in the national security strategy. I promise you, if you were in the national security strategy, it would not be for reasons you like. It would, I think we have to move away from this war on terror mindset in which, yes, Pakistan got a lot of attention from the US. Was it good attention? I don't think so. I don't think it was always positive attention. So look, U.S.-Pakistan relations are going to become a little more boring, and that's an okay thing. We should be talking about tariffs and about free trade agreements and about student exchanges and cultural things and visas and I don't know, how do we get mangoes into the United States fruit market? I mean, these are not exciting things to talk about, but that's what a more functional relationship looks like. We should not always be talking about having a U.S. drone base or what is Pakistan's role in fighting Al-Qaeda and all of these things. This is what dominated the relationship for 20 years. It's not the sign of a healthy relationship. It was actually the sign of an unhealthy relationship. But Pakistanis will have to be accustomed to not being talked about as much in Washington. And I actually think that's a good thing.
Absolutely, Adam. You made a point that we should more talks on tariff, economy, and all these things rather than security. And not being in Biden's national security strategy is good at the same time. So, Adam, what do you make of this Iran, Saudi rapprochement? Do you believe that this is a good move for Pakistan? How do you make of this, or do you believe that the tensions in the region will be low? Do you make something? What do you make from this place?
Anytime there's improved relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it's good for the region. And as we know, both Saudi Arabia and Iran have not always played nicely inside Pakistan. They've both caused problems inside Pakistan, but they're also both important partners of Pakistan, and particularly Saudi Arabia. But the relationship between Iran and Pakistan is important as well. Given the security situation along the border, given the people-to-people ties between the two countries, especially among some religious communities and so forth. It's important for security. It's important for tampering down sectarianism in the region. I think it's a net positive. Whether it will last, who knows? I think Saudi Arabia and Iran, they tend to move away from each other and then move back together every few years, and we see this repeat. I don't believe for a moment that they're actually committed towards non-interference with each other's domestic affairs. I think they'll continue to interfere, but at least they'll be talking to one another, and at least they'll have diplomatic relations, and that's always a positive thing.
So, Adam, one last quick question to you is that what do you make of this Bilawal Bhutto Zardari's visit to India for the SCO? Although during the SCO it was all good, but since Bilawal left, both sides were trading hot words with each other. So what do you make of that? So do you think that this is a missed opportunity for India and Pakistan? How do you see this?
Yeah, I do think it's a missed opportunity. From a diplomacy perspective, I think Bilawal represented Pakistan well and was able to get his point across. Although the bigger question we have to ask is it more important to get your point across, or is it more important to move towards normalized relations? The region can never be healthy so long as India and Pakistan aren't able to have normalized relations. It's going to be difficult with Indian elections and the Indians. I'm not one of these folks in Washington who says, thinks that India is sort of perfect and that the security concerns of Pakistan are irrelevant. I know that Pakistan's security concerns regarding India are valid. I do know that. That being said, I don't think Pakistan can achieve its own greatness so long as it continues to remain focused on India. And ultimately, the health of the region depends on moving towards normalized relations. And I think there is an opportunity where both sides could talk more. We do have relative peace along the LOC, and that shouldn't be taken for granted. That can change at any moment. And so there is an opportunity there.
Thank you very much, Adam, for speaking with me on this regional politics and how the world is moving. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for having me.